Mrs. Dalloway said she would buy the flowers herself. It is perhaps the most famous opening line in 20th century literature. On the surface, it is a simple errand: a woman, a Wednesday in June, a party to prepare for. But in the world of Virginia Woolf, there is no such thing as a simple moment. As Clarissa Dalloway steps out into the London air, she isn't just walking across a street, she is walking through time. With every breath, the present moment cracks open to reveal the vast, hidden depths of her past. A single street corner in 1923 carries the weight of a kiss shared 30 years ago. The strike of a clock isn't just a measure of an hour. It is a reminder that we are all, at every second, composed of everything we have ever been. Today, we're diving into a masterpiece that redefined how we see ourselves. We're exploring how Virginia Woolf used her tunneling process to prove that an ordinary day doesn't just lead toward death, it contains an entire lifetime. This is not just a story about a woman buying flowers. This is the anatomy of the human soul, captured in the span of 12 hours. 1. The tunneling process. Connecting past and present. To truly understand how Clarissa Dalloway can be both a middle-aged hostess in London and a vibrant young girl in the countryside at the exact same moment, we have to look at what Virginia Woolf called her tunneling process. It is the most radical invention of her prose, a way of digging subterranean caves behind her characters so that their pasts aren't just memories, but living, breathing spaces that exist right beneath the surface of the sidewalk. In a traditional novel, a flashback is like a tidy photo album you open and then close. But Woolf's tunnels are different. They are always open. Think of the famous moment Clarissa opens the door to go out. As she feels the squeak of the hinges, she isn't just in her house in Westminster. That specific sound and the touch of the air instantly tunnel her back to Bourton, 30 years prior, standing before the French windows of her youth. In this stratigraphy of the soul, there is no then and now. There is only a singular, expanded is. Woolf is making a profound argument here about the nature of identity. We are not a single point in time. We are the sum total of every version of ourselves we have ever been, stacked like layers of translucent silk. When Clarissa sees a neighbor or hears the tolling of Big Ben, she isn't just perceiving a sound. She is experiencing an echo that vibrates through every cave she has ever dug. The genius of this technique is that it allows Woolf to show us the immense, hidden dignity of a human life. Society sees a socialite buying flowers, but through the tunnel, we see a woman carrying the weight of her lost loves, her rejected proposals, and her silent triumphs, all contained within the time it takes to cross a street. This is the moment of being. It is the realization that our internal world is a vast, interconnected architecture where the past is never dead, it isn't even past. By connecting these caves at the surface of a single Wednesday in June, Woolf proves that the ordinary is a mask. Beneath the mundane routine of a London day lies the epic, sprawling drama of a lifetime, proving that if you look deep enough, a single hour can be as vast as an ocean. 2. The unseen double Septimus as Clarissa's shadow. In Mrs. Dalloway, Septimus and Clarissa never meet. They do not share a conversation, a memory, or even a moment of mutual awareness. And yet the novel binds them together more tightly than many characters who occupy the same room. Septimus is not Clarissa's opposite. He is her shadow. Clarissa represents a life that has learned how to survive by containment. She feels deeply, but she has trained herself to redirect feeling into form. Manners, schedules, social grace, the careful choreography of a party. Her sensitivity has not disappeared. It has been domesticated. Septimus embodies what happens when that domestication fails or is refused. Both characters share the same raw material: acute sensitivity, heightened perception, and an almost painful awareness of life's intensity. Clarissa experiences moments when the world feels unbearably vivid. The sound of Big Ben, the sight of the sky, the sudden rush of emotion triggered by memory. These moments arrive without warning, breaking through her cultivated composure. But Clarissa has learned how to step back from them. Septimus cannot. What Clarissa experiences as fleeting intensity, Septimus lives as permanent exposure. His mind does not filter. Images, memories, and emotions arrive with equal force, collapsing time and overwhelming the present. Where Clarissa contains meaning, Septimus is flooded by it. This is why Woolf structures the novel the way she does. Septimus does not appear as a separate subplot by accident. He exists to show us the version of Clarissa that could not survive. Clarissa chose safety. Septimus chose truth. Or, more precisely, he refused to dilute it. Clarissa's marriage, her social role, her devotion to hosting and connection are not shallow traits. They are defenses. They allow her to stay alive without being consumed by the same intensity that destroys Septimus. This is why Clarissa reacts so strongly to the news of his death. She does not know his name, but she recognizes the meaning. When she hears that a man has chosen death rather than submit to medical authority, she retreats inward, not out of curiosity, but out of recognition. She understands instinctively that this man has died for something she herself has spent a lifetime negotiating away. Septimus's death gives form to a fear Clarissa rarely allows herself to articulate, that survival may require a betrayal of one's deepest perceptions. In that moment, Septimus becomes Clarissa's mirror, not of who she is, but of who she might have been. Woolf is careful not to moralize this division. She does not tell us that Clarissa is wrong and Septimus is right, or vice versa. Instead, she presents them as two responses to the same human condition. One response learns how to live by compression. The other refuses compression entirely. The tragedy is not that Septimus dies while Clarissa lives. The tragedy is that these two modes of being cannot coexist within a single person. Clarissa survives because she has learned how to let parts of herself go quiet. Septimus is destroyed because he will not. Seen this way, Septimus is not a side character interrupting Clarissa's story. He is the suppressed truth that makes her life possible. And that is why he haunts the novel long after his physical presence ends, as every shadow does, not by speaking, but by revealing the shape of the light that cast it. 3. Big Ben versus Street Margarets, masculine versus feminine time. One of the quietest tensions in Mrs. Dalloway is not between characters, but between two clocks. Big Ben speaks with authority. Street Margaret's answers with something softer. Woolf does not treat these bells as background sound. She uses them as competing philosophies of time, two ways a life can be measured, and two ways a self can be formed. Big Ben is time as command. It arrives on schedule, interrupts without apology, and turns private feeling into a public rhythm. The novel repeatedly returns to that voice. Time that does not ask what you are doing or how you are feeling. It simply announces itself, as if existence were an appointment you must keep. Big Ben's striking divides the day into segments that feel almost moral. Now, not now. Too late, not yet. It is the clock that tells you your life is moving, whether you are ready or not. That quality is why Big Ben can feel masculine, not as biology, but as a cultural energy, linear, external, disciplinary. It is time that trains the body to obey the world. In modern life, this is the time of calendars, deadlines, commuting, meetings, productivity. It is the time that rewards control. It is also the time that quietly punishes interiority, because interiority slows you down. Street Margaret's, by contrast, is described in a different register. Where Big Ben's sound is often imagined as firm and final, Street Margaret's chime has a more wandering quality, as if it floats or dissolves into the air. It does not cut the day into hard units so much as it reminds you the day is already disappearing. Its tone feels less like a command and more like a presence time as atmosphere rather than time as verdict. That quality is why Street Margaret's can feel feminine again, not as anatomy, but as a psychic mode, receptive, porous, relational. This is time experienced from within, not imposed from without. It is the time of memory, of emotion, of noticing. It is the time in which 5 minutes can contain a lifetime, and a lifetime can hide inside a single thought. It is the time Clarissa lives in whenever the past returns without invitation. If Big Ben is the spine of the city, Street Margaret's is its breath. And what's striking is that Woolf does not ask us to choose one. She shows how both forms of time shape human life, especially the inner lives of people who are sensitive. Clarissa is constantly negotiating between these two clocks. Externally, she lives under Big Ben. She has a party to prepare, errands to run, roles to perform. Her body moves with the day's demands. She knows what time it is in the social sense, when to arrive, when to smile, when to speak, when to hide what is too intense. Big Ben is the sound of her survival strategy: composure, order, public rhythm. But internally, Clarissa lives in Street Margaret's time. That is why her day does not feel like a list of tasks. It feels like a series of inner openings. A sound, a street, a remembered name, and suddenly the past is not past. In her, time is not linear. It is layered. Street Margaret's is the bell that matches her inner life, the soft return of what she thought she had contained. Septimus experiences the same conflict, but with a different outcome. Big Ben's time, external, official, procedural, is precisely what his inner world cannot bear. Trauma has already shattered linear time for him. For Septimus, there is no safe separation between then and now. The past is present. The present is unbearable. In that condition, Big Ben becomes not merely a clock, but a pressure. Society's insistence that he re-enter order, re-enter sequence, re-enter a world that pretends time heals simply because it passes. Street Margaret's, in Septimus, is not gentle. It is relentless. It is the flood of inner time with no boundaries. So the bells become more than aesthetic detail. They become a diagnosis of modern life. Big Ben is what the world demands you respect. Street Margaret's is what your inner life keeps asking you to admit. The more together you appear, the more likely it is that you have learned to live in Big Ben's rhythm while privately surviving in Street Margaret's undertow. That is why Woolf's use of bells still feels contemporary. We live in an age of Big Ben notifications, schedules, optimization, while our inner lives still obey Street Margaret's. We do not feel time the way our devices measure it. We feel it the way memory measures it, in returns, echoes, sudden collapses. A useful modern comparison is the difference between a stopwatch and a heartbeat. A stopwatch is Big Ben, objective, external, exact, indifferent. A heartbeat is Street Margaret's, variable, intimate, responsive. It speeds up with fear, slows down with tenderness, stalls with grief. It does not measure time. It is time as lived. Woolf places both in the same day to reveal a quiet truth. A human being is always living inside two clocks at once. One clock tells you what the world expects. The other tells you what your life has actually been. And when those clocks fall out of alignment, that is when a person begins to fracture quietly, politely, invisibly. Which is why Mrs. Dalloway feels so accurate to modern adulthood. We are not exhausted because we have no time. We are exhausted because we are forced to live in one kind of time while carrying another. Big Ben tells you to move on. Street Margaret's reminds you that you never fully did. And between those two bells, Woolf compresses an entire lifetime into a single day, not through plot, but through the way time itself becomes psychological. 4. The politics of the party, an act of defiance. On the surface, Clarissa Dalloway's party looks like the least political event imaginable. It is private, domestic, aesthetic. A gathering of the well-dressed, the well-mannered, the socially fluent. If you read the novel quickly, the party can feel like a decorative frame around the real matters of history and trauma happening elsewhere. The war is recent. Men return altered. Septimus breaks under what he carries. Politics is in Parliament, in doctors' offices, in imperial memory. And yet Woolf makes a radical claim quietly, almost without announcing it. The party is political, precisely because it does not look like politics. Clarissa's party is not a celebration of the world as it is. It is an attempt to remake the world, briefly, in her own image. That is defiance. Because Clarissa's society is structured by exclusion, by rank, by the invisible rules that decide who belongs and who does not. Post-war London is haunted by class and empire, by masculine institutions, by public power that presents itself as natural. Clarissa has learned to live inside those structures. She benefits from them, but she is not fully at peace with them. Her life, like the city's, is built on a kind of polite violence, the constant sorting of people into categories. The party is her way of interrupting that sorting, not abolishing it, not overthrowing parliament, but creating, for a few hours, a different kind of order, one made from attention rather than authority. Clarissa's real gift is not taste. It is perception. She notices the fragile dignity of people, the loneliness behind their performances, the way a small kindness can steady someone's entire evening. Hosting is often dismissed as feminine triviality, but Woolf treats it as a serious craft, the craft of making human beings feel briefly less alone. In that sense, the party becomes Clarissa's alternative to politics as domination. Instead of control, she offers connection. Instead of command, she offers a space. And the space matters because the world outside does not feel safe. Woolf sets the novel in the aftermath of war, and the emotional atmosphere is still charged with damage. The institutions that claim to restore order do not always heal. They often simplify, discipline, and silence. We see this most brutally in the doctors who approach Septimus as a problem to be managed. Their authority is official, masculine, confident. It is the language of public power. It sounds like certainty. Clarissa's party is the opposite language. It does not diagnose. It does not fix. It does not reduce people to symptoms, roles, or reputations. It gathers. And gathering is political when the world has been trained to fragment. This is where the party's defiance becomes clearer. Clarissa is not naive. She understands that society can be cruel. She has felt the chill of judgment. She knows how quickly intimacy can be punished by gossip. She also knows that life is short and precarious, not only because of war, but because of mortality itself. The party is her answer to that precarity. If life is fragile, then what matters is to create moments of coherence, moments where a person feels seen. Think of it as Clarissa's version of civic architecture. Governments build roads and monuments to shape public life. Clarissa builds an evening. But what she is building is not entertainment. It is an emotional structure, a temporary city where people can circulate without violence, where differences can coexist without immediate humiliation. That sounds small until you remember what kind of era this is. A world that has proven it can organize itself into mass destruction. Against that scale of brutality, Clarissa's act seems inadequate. But Woolf is not comparing a party to a war in terms of power. She is comparing them in terms of meaning. War is collective action organized around death. Clarissa's party is collective presence organized around life, even if only for a night. This is why the party is not mere escapism. It is Clarissa's protest against despair. It is her refusal to let the world's damage define the only possible form of togetherness. A modern comparison might help. In an age of constant outrage and ideological performance, many people retreat into the private sphere. This can look like avoidance, but sometimes it is something else. A refusal to let public violence colonize the soul. When a person insists on tenderness in a brutal culture, that tenderness becomes a kind of dissent. Clarissa's party is that kind of dissent. It is not the dissent of slogans. It is the dissent of atmosphere. She cannot change the machinery of her society, but she can change the air inside a room. And Woolf suggests that this matters more than we admit, because human beings do not live inside systems alone. They live inside moods, inside tones, inside the invisible emotional rules that decide whether a life feels bearable. Clarissa's politics is the politics of tone, and that is exactly why it is easy to overlook. When the Prime Minister arrives, the party brushes against official power. His presence is like a seal of legitimacy, yet Woolf does not portray him as impressive. He is simply a figure, someone people notice because they have been trained to. The contrast is subtle but sharp. The most powerful man in the room contributes almost nothing to its meaning. The room's meaning is created by Clarissa through attention, intuition, and effort. That reversal is Woolf's political point. Public power is loud, but often hollow. Private power is quiet, but it can be real. Clarissa's party, then, is not a trivial feminine hobby. It is an act of authorship. She is composing a social world the way a writer composes a sentence, arranging pauses, managing collisions, creating coherence out of fragments. And in a novel obsessed with fragmentation of time, of self, of sanity, this act matters. It is Clarissa's defiance of disintegration. Her party says, "We are still here. We can still gather. We can still recognize one another as human. Not perfectly, not permanently, but long enough to prove that the world is not only what it has done to us. That is politics. Not the politics of laws, but the politics of what a life chooses to protect." 5. The lead circles, the weight of mortality. In Mrs Dalloway, Woolf gives death a sound, not a scream, not a dramatic announcement, a bell. Again and again, the narrative pauses for the tolling of Big Ben. But Woolf does not describe those chimes as neutral. She turns them into an image, almost a physical sensation, when she writes of the leaden circles dissolving in the air. That phrase is one of the novel's quiet masterpieces because it captures something most people feel but rarely name: the way mortality arrives in ordinary life, not as a tragedy, but as a pressure. A lead circle is heavy by definition. It does not float like music. It does not shimmer like light. It drops. It sinks. It drags the air downward. Woolf makes time feel like that, not simply passing, but weighing. And that is the first shock of the phrase. Time is not airy. Time is not abstract. Time has mass. When Big Ben strikes, it is not just reminding Clarissa that she has errands and a party. It is reminding her that the day is finite and that every hour passing is a portion of life being spent. This is why the lead circles are not merely poetic decoration. They are an existential device. They turn the external measurement of time into an internal confrontation with death. The novel is set after the war, but it is not a war novel. It is a mortality novel. The war has made death visible, but the deeper subject is what happens when death becomes a permanent presence inside the psyche. People go back to shopping, hosting, gossiping, but the air has changed. The leaden circles are Woolf's way of showing that change. Even the most ordinary sound in London now carries the aftertaste of impermanence. Clarissa is especially vulnerable to this. She does not respond to death with melodrama. She responds with a kind of refined dread, the sudden awareness that life is exquisite precisely because it ends. This is why her thoughts repeatedly drift toward questions of being, of loneliness, of the strange boundary between self and world. The lead circles arrive like a reminder that everything she builds, her marriage, her social role, her parties, exists under a ceiling. Not a moral ceiling, a biological one. The chimes make mortality unavoidable, but they also reveal Clarissa's specific way of coping with it. Clarissa's answer to death is not denial, it is creation. She throws parties not because she is shallow, but because she is frightened in an intelligent, controlled way. A party is her way of shaping time into meaning. If time is going to pass, then she will make the passing contain something: connection, atmosphere, a small moment of coherence. In that sense, hosting is her form of existential work. It is what philosophers call a response to finitude, a way of meeting the knowledge of death without collapsing. This is why the lead circles are also quietly ironic. They weigh the air, but Clarissa tries to fill the air with light. They mark time, but she tries to turn time into presence. They announce the day is moving toward its end, but she insists on gathering people as if to say, before it ends, we will be together. A modern comparison might be the way people celebrate birthdays. A birthday party is technically a celebration of life, but it is also a disguised conversation with death. You are older, time has moved, the number is proof. So you gather people, light candles, hold laughter in your hands, not because you forget mortality, but because you remember it. Clarissa's party functions the same way. It is a ritual built against the lead weight of time. The lead circles also reshape how we understand Septimus. For Clarissa, mortality is a pressure she can respond to through form, through social creation. For Septimus, mortality is not a pressure. It is a tunnel. The circles do not dissolve. They close. Death is not a reminder that life is brief. It is the only escape from a world that has become unbearable. This contrast matters because it shows Woolf's full range. She is not giving us one perspective on death. She is giving us two, one in which death makes life precious, one in which life makes death necessary. That is why the bell imagery is so central. The same chime that can feel like a beautiful reminder to one person can feel like a sentence to another. The sound itself is neutral, the psyche is not. And that may be Woolf's most unsettling insight. Mortality does not affect everyone equally. It interacts with temperament. Some people can turn the thought of death into gratitude, intensity, even tenderness. Others experience it as crushing pressure, a narrowing of possibility, a constant sense that the world is closing in. If you have ever felt your day suddenly become heavy for no reason, if you have ever heard an ordinary sound, a distant siren, a clock, a train, and felt a wave of dread move through you, then you understand what Woolf is doing with the lead circles. She is translating an invisible psychological experience into a concrete image. And she is doing it in a way that remains painfully modern. Today, we live with constant timekeeping, notifications, deadlines, digital clocks on every screen. But none of that changes the deeper reality Woolf names, the way time sometimes feels like weight. The way mortality can arrive not in tragedy, but in Tuesday afternoon silence. So when Big Ben strikes and the leaden circles dissolve in the air, Woolf is not just marking time. She is asking a question we avoid because it is too intimate. What do you do with the weight of knowing your life is limited? Clarissa's answer is to build moments of presence. Septimus's answer is to refuse the world that cannot carry his pain. And between those two answers, Mrs. Dalloway becomes what it truly is. Not a novel about a party, but a novel about what people do when time starts to feel heavy. By the end of Mrs. Dalloway, nothing dramatic has changed on the surface. The party ends, guests leave, London continues, and yet something essential has been revealed. Woolf does not close the novel with resolution, justice, or transformation in the conventional sense. She closes it with a moment brief, inward, almost imperceptible, in which Clarissa stands alone and feels life, whole and exposed. This is what the novel has been moving toward all along. Not answers, not conclusions, but an eternal moment of recognition. Clarissa does not suddenly become wiser or freer. She does not escape her society or undo her compromises. What she gains instead is clarity, an understanding that life is not meant to be mastered, solved, or purified. It is meant to be inhabited even with fear, even with loss, even with contradiction. Septimus's death, the weight of time, the pressure of the bells, the fragile architecture of the party, all of it converges here. Clarissa feels, in a single pulse, the unbearable cost of being alive and the quiet miracle of still being here. This is Woolf's most radical idea, that meaning does not live in duration, but in intensity. A lifetime does not need decades to unfold. It can happen in one afternoon, in one sound, in one private realization no one else can see. That is why Mrs. Dalloway endures, because it understands something modern life keeps trying to silence, that beneath schedules, roles, productivity, and noise, we are still creatures of moments, and that the most truthful moments are often the least visible. We recognize ourselves in Clarissa not because she is heroic, but because she is human. She survives by shaping fragments into coherence, knowing it will never be permanent. She accepts that wholeness is not a state, it is a passing alignment, an eternal moment. And when the novel closes, Woolf leaves us with a question that lingers long after the page ends. If your entire life could be felt in a single day, would you recognize it when it arrived? That question is why this book does not age. It waits, quietly, for the moment when you are ready to feel it,